whenever we go to one website, whatever the content that is visible, it keeps on changing. Now the thing is, if a content keeps on changing, that should come from somewhere, right? So the place from where that particular content comes, that is nothing but a backend server. So as a backend developer, you are supposed to build that particular server. When I say server, that is nothing but one simple program that will keep on running, and whenever one person visits one website, that server will send some data to the front end, and which will be later displayed to that particular user depending upon whether they are logged in, whether they are not logged in, whether they are visiting for that particular website first time. Depending upon all these things, you can make sure what kind of content you are going to send from this particular backend server. So in order to build one backend server, a backend web developer should code certain things and build it. So when we are talking about backend web development, technologies like backend server language, and as well as something like database, and maybe some kind of storage options, all these things comes into place. So as a backend language, you can use something like maybe JavaScript with Node.js, or even PHP, or even Python. There are so many other languages like Go language, and even C++ can be used as a backend language. But the thing is, whenever we are learning backend technologies, we need to get familiarized with some of these popular technologies. Whenever I got started, I started with PHP. But that doesn't mean that you have to start with PHP. You can use something like maybe Python, using which you can build some kind of backend server, or even you can go ahead with the Node.js and build it using JavaScript. So all these technologies will make sure that you are able to build some kind of backend server, and you will send the data to the front end. When you are sending the data, usually now being front end and back end being separate, you'll be sending something like REST API. REST API looks something like this, which is like JSON format, which will display certain data, and that data will be intercepted by this front end framework, and in the end users will be able to see a proper website with the proper data. But as a backend developer, your responsibility is to code backend language and manipulate database. So what is this database? Database is made up of lots of data. From where do this data comes from? Obviously data should come from front end, and from front end data cannot be directly put in the database, because database is something which is like protected. So when that's the case, your backend language plays big role in order to make sure that whatever the data comes, it's authenticated, it's clean, and whatever the data makes sense, that only will get stored in the backend server. So when we are building some kind of backend, most of the time we don't just use this kind of backend language in order to create one backend server. Instead, we use frameworks like Laravel, Django, or even Node.js framework like Nest.js, or even Express.js for that matter. So all these frameworks will make sure that whatever I explained earlier, that is like sending the things to database, authentication, authorization, all these things will be simplified by these frameworks. And when we are using this framework, there are some certain rules which they impose on you, using which you can literally make sure that users are authenticated or they are not authenticated, and you can communicate with the database and give the proper access to them. Some frameworks like Django does this very easily. Some frameworks like Laravel also make sure that you are able to build the front end also with the same backend technologies. But usually when we are using something like Express.js or Nest.js, we just communicate using JSON object, and we implement authentication and all those things manually, so that we have control over entire aspect of backend language, because that's important. So now how do you become one backend developer? In order to become backend developer, you just need to understand that what and all HTTP requests are there. So whenever we are communicating from front end, all the requests comes as this HTTP request that I explained in some other video. You can check it out in my channel. I'll put it in the description also. But in simple way, if I want to explain, whenever we are creating some resource, we send post request to the backend server. Whenever we are trying to get some data from backend, we are going to send get request. And obviously, whenever we want to delete something, delete request. And in order to update something, we send put request. So all these requests will make sure that backend exactly knows that what kind of things to do whenever some kind of request comes. And you have to handle all the retrieving and saving part by yourself to the database. It's not like these requests will automatically save the data. You have to manually select which database to use and how you want the data to be saved and validation. All those things you have to handle. But in general terms, we are saying that HTTP requests are responsible for doing all these things. So with that, I want to end this video. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.